231. That's the average number of apps used by many companies. This leads to a lot of context switching that can distract employees and costs your company. Luckily, Grammarly can help. Grammarly's AI works in over 500,000 apps and websites, making it easy for your team to crank out clear, on-brand emails, documents, messages, and more. In just one click, they can go from blank page to first draft, all without leaving the page they're on. Grammarly has 15 years of experience building effective, secure AI that can be implemented in days with minimal IT overhead. It goes beyond basic grammar to help tailor writing to specific audiences, whether that means adding an executive summary, fine-tuning tone, or cutting out jargon. Join 70,000 teams who save an average of $5,000 per employee per year using Grammarly. Go to grammarly.com/enterprise to learn more. Grammarly, enterprise-ready AI.
Okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Edna White, and I am your guest for Keeping It Real on Purpose, the place where we talk to real people about real things all the time, in real time, all on purpose. And today we're with an amazing guest, Jacqueline Heller, and she's an author, and she's going to talk about her book, Yesterday Never Sleeps. So welcome to the show, Jacqueline.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Edna. Thanks for having me.
Great. So tell us how you show up in the world as the author of Yesterday Never Sleeps.
Well, I wrote this book organically. I wasn't planning on writing a book. I mean, I've authored articles because I'm a doctor, I'm a psychiatrist, and a medical doctor, and I'm a psychoanalyst, and I'm board certified in neurology and psychiatry. So I have, I've written things academically and otherwise. But and my mother wrote a memoir, and my mother had a very interesting story and was an interesting person. So when she died, I really felt, and it was right before COVID, so they kind of blended together, but I was very grief stricken. You never get over losing your mom. There's no such thing as permanent closure. And I found that just writing anything was very cathartic. But I actually responded to a letter in my family about something that happened. And I responded to that, and my niece wrote back to me, and she said, this is so amazing what you're telling me about Grandpa, because I didn't know these things. And so many more things make sense to me now. So it sort of highlighted for me that connecting to your roots and to your heritage and to your family history is very important, because we carry things on, we carry things forward, especially things we don't want to, for love or not,
Right.
whether you love your kids or not, we screw them up and we pass on some of our stuff. So I was very touched by that. And she said, could you keep writing? So I finished this chapter about my dad, and then I wrote one about my mom. And within a few months, I'd written a memoir. But I was not happy with it, because I thought, if I'm going to do something with this, at first it was just for my family, just the family story. And I just heard you talking about that with another guest, writing your story for your kids and your grandkids, so they know where you came from. Because I'm first generation American in my family. My parents were Holocaust survivors in Poland. So I came from, devastation. And, being the first American was a lot of pressure to kind of the hope for the future and a new beginning and all of that. So my memoir goes into all that, and it goes into my family history. And because we have a lost generation, I was especially interested in reviving whatever I can and unearthing whatever I could. That's the personal aspect of where I come from. And then professionally, I feel like it's very important for people to understand how necessary it is to go inward, meaning to know how you feel, to know your emotions, and to be able to think about them, because too many people just point outward and point the finger and blame other people, and are, and they need to spend more time going inward. And I think we'll be a lot better off, because we don't know ourselves as well as we think we should, So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I do agree that we don't go inwardly a lot. We ask a lot of questions outwardly, and we get a lot of misnomers and misinformation from other people that thwart our way to live in general. So I agree with that. Number two, I agree with that. The traumas that we have, we give them to our children, whether we know it or not. But when we know better, we do better. We kind of like can make corrections. So I like that part. Talk about, the part that you talk about integrating life's current
Sure.
and past connections. Talk about that.
Okay, I'll try to not take 20 minutes to do it, but so we all have bugaboos, we all have hidden hurts, we all have things that we repress, that we don't want to remember because it's too painful, and we all have a deep unconscious mind, an inner mind that we can't access very easily. In fact, our unconscious rules about 90% of what we do, our thoughts and actions. We don't know what we're doing, or we don't think that, we're not conscious of it. So that's and the reason is because if I spend my day thinking about how am I going to get out of this chair, I have to lift my right thigh, my left thigh, my right foot, if I have to think about each thing we do, we wouldn't be able to function. And secondarily, if I have to remember every horrible thing that happened to me, getting nearly raped and killed, or having terrible, family history of survivorship, or, hazing in medical school, or whatever it might be, or my terrible first birth, we all have things. And so you don't want to think about those things because you'd be too upset all the time. So my goal is to help people go inward by labeling their emotions, understanding their emotions, which a lot of people can't do. I mean, you could say to me, Jackie, have you felt today? And people say, I don't know. And so basically, people react with a hair trigger, knee-jerk reactions, and they react and they act before they think. And and it's very important to be able to think about what's going on and decide, is this making sense for the context or not? So that's kind of what I demonstrate in my academically. I do a lot of writing about that in the book, and I write about lots and lots of stories, because that's how we live. We live to tell stories. And then there's my personal memoir, where I demonstrate the necessity of having a life story. We all have to have a life story, from beginning to middle to current, ongoing, updating it all the time for context and for where we are today, and know our parents and our history, but make sure it's good for us and it works for us, and we're not inheriting things, they're not inheriting their baggage that's bad for us.
Right.
So that's kind of, so integrating is basically, and if you do that, if you learn to develop a part of yourself that can look inwards at your emotions, which basically are physical, like like if you let's say you're driving and someone flips you off because you started to go into their lane, and they go nuts, and they are yelling at you, and you realize that I didn't do anything, and that person may have road rage because of things that have nothing to do with you. Maybe he was humiliated, or she was humiliated as a child, and they feel like you're trying to show them up, so we do all kinds of things. We blame all kinds of people for all kinds of things, so we don't read people properly. And so basically, if we go inward, we know ourselves, then we can know other people. Otherwise, we can't set a boundary between ourselves and others.
So I think you're in the same I guess realm that I'm on today, because we're talking about working on my inner self, and being so very clear with yourself, so that you don't triggers, like someone like at the office, or smirk or something, and you think they're smirking at you, and it's not even about you. You take it on, and you get triggered by that when you're not resolving past traumas. So I know in your book you talk about mindful self-reflection, and that's where I am right now. Is mindful self-reflection, because that kind of gives me a peek into, or actually a view into, what makes me tick. And a lot of times is that we don't know what we want and who we are. What would you say to guide someone into that realm of what we want and who we are?
Well, I think first we have to understand and believe and accept the fact that we are mammals, we're animals, and we're not as smart and we're not as knowledgeable about ourselves as we think. and we don't, and also our world has gotten so so insane with marketing and media and stuff and the internet that people don't even trust their instincts anymore. They don't trust their experience. And this, of course, COVID and being masked didn't help, because we lost physical contact. We lost touch with our sensations, seeing people. I mean, I saw people every day for 2 years until I saw their mask off. I would not have recognized them on the street. And kids have lost the ability to recognize expression. So what you made a very good comment about the smirk on someone's face, because we're born, our brain is born with templates that are built in, like a baby looks at their mom and they coo and they smile because they recognize a smile, they recognize happy. We're born with emotions like joy, sadness, anger, fear. Those we're born with, so that we recognize those. So you understand certain things that you take with you ordinarily, so if you're walking down the street and the guy's ogling you from across the street, you don't know why he's staring at you. Like, why is he staring at you, right? You don't know, because you don't know him. That's where we need to get more sophisticated. We need to check in with the other person, and try to be curious about them. I mean, not talking about a stranger, but the people that we want to have good connections with. So basically doing all that self-reflective stuff, it totally changes your brain. I mean, it increases the connections from the front of the brain all around the cerebral cortex, and it makes for the things that make the high brain, the upper brain, work well. It makes us rational, reasonable. We can learn to sequence, we can forecast, we can predict things. So it's really important for those higher cognitive functions. And that's been shown, neuroscience shows that that's the case. It's not just good for our spirit, and it's not just good for the brain's connections. It's good for longevity. It's good for, if you don't lose, if you don't use it, you lose it, so it's brain exercise.
Right.
So that's very important, because that might motivate people. So I would say, consider this the best habit you can form. I mean, besides for physical exercise, probably the best thing you could do. Physical exercise is the best thing for your brain too, but the best thing you could do for your life, for your connections, for your relationships, for becoming a kinder person to yourself and others, is to start practicing, which is in my book. All the exercises are there, but to start practicing thinking about, relaxing yourself, because we can control our breathing. And when you control your breathing, you relax your whole nervous system, and think about whatever it is that comes to mind, and let go with those thoughts, go with those thoughts and see where they take you. But most important is to recognize the physical sensations, the little shifts from moment to moment every day. At first you have to concentrate on it. For me, it's automatic. So, if I came home from lunch and I noticed that there's a shift of my mood from 1 minute to the next. I was happy to see my friend, and something happened. I feel rejected, or I feel crestfallen, I feel upset. And I think, what happened? Well, she said my haircut wasn't nice, but the good thing about my bad haircut was that it'll grow back. And I thought that made me feel. So, it's a backhanded compliment. So if I realize that, then I can think, well, who cares about that? And I'll think, well, maybe I was done, maybe something happened. So those are little things, but those little things in the day where your mood shift, you start paying attention to those, and then the connections start coming to your past, to your history. It's like being on the internet and you're reading an article and there's a hyperlink. And there's one hyperlink, and they keep going and going, infinite connection.
Right. Yeah.
That's
a good example. Good example. That's great.
So that's what I would say. I would say, know yourself before Aristotle said, the beginning of all wisdom is knowing yourself. There's no wisdom unless you know yourself.
I about that one. Yeah.
It's really true.
That one. Yeah. You have to know yourself. I know for sure, nothing sparked for me until I knew what I wanted. Nothing sparked for me until I knew who I was without repeating something that someone else told me. Exactly. Nothing sparked for me, and I was able to stand in my own power, which is that it was monumental for me. Being a childhood sexual abuse survivor to thriver, it was very difficult, to stand in my own power. It took me a long time to kind of stand in my own power. Now I am standing in my own power like never before, and stating things that I thought I would never be able to state as a human being, and I know that's important,
Of
standing
course.
in your own power. We
Very,
talked
very
earlier
important.
about parenthood and parenthood, generational things, coming connections from the past. You wrote something in your book about the good enough parent. Can you share a little bit about that with the audience?
Well,
The good enough.
I can't tell you how many parenting workshops and classes I've done. And mostly I've done mostly like teenagers and, middle school, the tough years, like
Yeah,
12 to 18, when the kids are in high school, middle school and high school. And that's a time
right.
when kids are becoming independent, they're becoming autonomous, they're forming their identity. Who am I? What am I?
Mhm.
Am I he, she, we,
Right.
they, what's going on? And everything is changing in their bodies and their minds. And the world really needs to be pretty stable for them, ideally.
Right.
And so I can't tell you how many parents I have who start off the session or the question with, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if I'm doing this right. And there's
Right.
so few things that are right and wrong in parenting. And besides for abuse of
Mhm.
your child and neglecting them morbidly, I mean, you can't make too many mistakes if you love your kid. And if you love your kid,
Right.
by good enough, I'll tell you, I'll qualify that in a second, because there's
Mhm.
actually numbers that go with that. But if you really love your kid, there's always room to repair a rupture. When you have an argument and you
Yes.
repair it well,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
relationship deepens, the bond gets better.
Yeah.
And so good enough parent is a
Absolutely.
parent that's curious about their child from the minute they're born. They see wonderment in them. A good enough parent knows their own emotions, so they don't blame their kids for their own baggage. A good enough parent is self-reflective, and this is borne out in attachment theory. This is not, I'm not making this up. This is like socially scientifically proven, that a good enough parent is sympathetic, is empathetic, and understands their child's temperament, understands how they came out. We all come out with our own. Some are more nervous, some are less nervous. Some are easy to love because anything goes. They're
Right.
smiley, they're happy. Some are slow to warm up, but they get there. And some are just impossibly fussy and difficult. Just just a general range, and of course, the range
Right.
it continues. So a good enough parent is someone who's just stable, steady, nurturing, consistent love, consistent attention. That's it. It's like the way you would treat, it's the way animals treat their young, And
Yeah.
when people say, well, I don't know if I should breastfeed or not breastfeed, I have to go to work. I don't know what to do. I don't know what the right thing is. Just do what you feel. Do what you feel you need to
Well,
do
that's
for
good.
yourself and for your family. If it doesn't work for your family, although it may be healthier, it's not going to work. If it doesn't work for you, it's not going to be good for your kid. So
Right.
and
That's good.
this fact is what's been studied is that one person, it doesn't have to be the actual parent, one person is consistently loving and kind for 20, 30 hours a week. That's enough. That's enough for resilience.
Wow.
That's enough to do well. That's
Wow.
enough. That's enough to have, to grow up with autonomy, with a sense of self, with identity, and to be able
Really?
to do well.
Wow.
So
Didn't know that. I didn't know. That's good.
yeah,
That's good.
that's about right. 20, 30 hours
Mhm.
a week. I mean, I learned that a long time ago. It
Yeah.
was like a good factoid, but I don't remember where I read it or where I learned it, but I learned it long ago, and it's come up over and over again. And Bruno Bettelheim is a famous psychologist who he wrote a book called
Mhm.
The Good Enough Parent. And everyone thinks they have to be perfect and they've got to hover around their kids and do, or it's all or nothing, So
Right.
it's very difficult right now.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah. Well, that's good stuff. Audience, this is really, really good stuff. And I'm learning something as you're talking about this, because my specialty is trauma, because of recovering generational trauma as well. And
I
I
appreciate that.
love talking about the aspects of what it does, what it really impacts in your life, because I know it impacted me like greatly on levels that I didn't think it impacted me, but
Absolutely.
it
I
did,
believe you.
you know.
I
Yeah,
believe
it really
generational
did.
trauma
And
is intense.
yes, it is intense. It's
It's
like an
very,
onion. I talk about it like an onion, when you peel an onion, literally you peel it. It's you never stop peeling until and you're crying at the same time.
that's a whole generational
Everything
trauma is a huge topic.
crying.
Because the
Yeah,
inherited
yeah,
inheriting
it's so
effects of
serious.
trauma
So
are
serious.
really, it's a huge subject, but it's worth talking about
Yeah.
because people don't realize that if and this is a social comment, this is not individual, but
Yeah.
even for the individual, if
Mhm.
you lose a generation or you've been subjugated or you've been tortured or
Mhm.
your people have been murdered, these are unspeakable things.
Right.
If you're a victim of oppression, whether it's
Yeah.
whether it's Rwanda or whether it's Sudan or whether it's the Holocaust or whether it's slavery, these are all horrible things.
Right.
And
Yeah.
all most social calamities are man-made. I mean, most
Yeah.
calamities, we have natural disasters, we have hurricanes, we have earthquakes, but yeah, I mean, most bad things are man-made, and these things resonate, they reverberate emotionally, mentally, and physically. Physically, there are inherited changes that can be seen,
Mhm.
over generations when you look back. So it's very, very important. And if we
Yeah.
don't know,
It is.
I almost called the book Incest Begets Incest because I wanted to have a shock
Mhm.
value to understand that we really need to break
Mhm.
the cycle. And there's no breaking the
Yeah.
cycle unless we know ourselves and we take responsibility. And the more you know
Right.
yourself and the more you connect your dots and you fill out the puzzle of
Yeah.
your life, because there's so many
Yeah.
people who aren't sick, they don't have a psychiatric disorder, but they don't feel good,
Mhm.
something wrong,
Yeah.
they don't get the way they feel,
Yeah.
they don't get something, they're missing something, or they're anxious or they're
Yeah.
down, they're depressed, and they don't know why. And it's not necessarily a biological problem. They feel empty, they feel
Mhm.
void, they feel like there's something missing,
Right.
as an example, or they're
Right.
terrorized like I was, or they're afraid and they don't know what they're afraid of, you know.
Mhm.
So those things,
Yeah, that it's a big component. It's a whole
it's a whole
big
big,
component.
it's another story.
Yeah. Yes, but it's, I always say it's worth having the conversation. And that's what, my show is all about, is having those conversations, around books or whatever. And I know that you've compiled some of your own experiences
Oh
within
yeah,
this book.
the
What
second half.
did you Yeah, what did you mean by liberation 55 years later?
Oh, in
What
my
did you
dream
want to get
chapter.
across?
Well, you
Yes.
talking about the
Mhm.
dream chapter? Well, dreams,
Yes.
dreams are the royal road to the unconscious, to quote Sigmund Freud. I mean, dreams
Mhm.
really get you close to your inner world. And there's enough
Okay.
scientific neuroscience data that shows you that dreams are an expression of what we tamp down, of what we don't want to know about. And we should pay attention to our dreams. And it's hard
Right.
to learn how to interpret them, but you can if you go with your emotions,
Yeah,
you understand
I
things
agree
come
with
up.
that.
So
Yeah.
so that chapter was about it's about dreams, getting connected to yourself and your deeper self.
Okay.
And it took me 55 years to get over it, completely recover from a dream that haunted me since I was 5. And some
Oh,
people say
wow.
it's the most interesting chapter of the book because it's kind of
Yeah.
because there aren't that many kids that I kept a mental diary. I wouldn't write anything down, but I kept a mental diary for years. And
Yeah.
that's a result of epigenetic familial trauma that's directly relates to my parents being survivors and needing to flee and needing
Right.
to remember, either
Right.
carry things that
Okay.
were portable and get ready to run any minute. So they kept everything in their head. And I didn't want to write anything down
Mhm.
in case the Nazis got me and they killed me, and
Yeah.
the world would read my diary like Anne Frank, or they'd burn and
Yeah.
burn the books or whatever. So I kept everything in my memory, which is also a direct result of being my parents' child. But
Yeah.
this dream I had when I was 5 haunted me on and off till I was 60. I mean, really, it haunted me for decades because it was so
Right.
embedded in my family lore, in my family history, and in being Jewish, for centuries
Right.
of things showed up in this dream. So I say liberation 55 years later because it was close to the liberation of the concentration camps. It was kind of the idea liberation comes up and freedom comes up in my book a lot. So, so that was a reference to being liberated from this harrying, haranguing nightmare that I had when I was 5 years old. And I'm still making connections to it, even though when I finally figured out what it was about completely, it never bothered me again. Hasn't bothered. I mean, maybe I was 55. I don't know how long ago it was, but hasn't bothered me in years.
Right.
So
wow. And that's good information, audience, that's really good information to know, because don't ignore your dreams. Because I know when I dream, I'm writing it down. If I can remember it, like the moment I remember it, I'm writing it down, trying to interpret what is this about? What emotion was I feeling before I went to bed? What was going through my mind? What am I dealing with emotionally? Because usually emotionally something does, portray itself in your unconscious.
I mean, yesterday never sleeps means that yesterday isn't even past, because the past is present. Because if you don't resolve these things that are painful, constant press for them to come up. And when there's something in the day that can attach itself to that bit of you that's hurting but isn't resolved and is giving you symptoms of depression or anxiety, free floating anxiety, then you make those connections. And sleep and dreams are meant to do that. I mean, they actually are meant to help you clear and deal with your emotions, because intense emotion is what gets us. The intense emotion in the limbic system and the amygdala. It's a part of the brain that is a seat of intense emotion, raw emotion, and that's where painful, terrible experiences get stored. And getting a hold of that's a big deal. I mean, we have to learn to get a hold of that and tame it, and we can, but we have to go inward to do it. It's not going to help to blame other people.
No. You said so much good information that I know my audience is going to love, and more so to go and pick up Yesterday Never Sleeps. Where can they find your book?
Well, the book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and any bookstore, your favorite bookstore, Walmart, Kmart, Books is a million. I mean, it's kind of available anywhere. And you can find out anything about me that's out there on my website, which is jacquelineheller.com.
Wonderful. So what is the last thing that you would tell my audience about something that has to do with this book that could really take them through the week?
I would say, you don't have to be in therapy to do better, to get to know yourself better. And if you're interested in the mind, and if you're interested in how you are the way you are, how you got to be the way you are, start going inward with some mindful reflection. They're easy exercises, and let yourself go and wander and see where it takes you. And there are exercises on how to become a better communicator. And they're all related to the same thing, to increasing your reflective function and your ability to think about how you feel. Once you think about how you feel, then you have a narrative, then you have a story that's works for you. Inheriting your parents' story is fine to a point, but you have to be able to tell their story and then say, that's their story, but my story is layered differently because I'm me, I'm not them. So you can pass down their stories, but keep in mind that you're annotating them for your context. And it's very important to do that, especially if you don't want to repeat bad history, So that's what I would say. We need to realize we don't know as much as we think we do about ourselves. And it's a lifelong work, but it's worth it. And it's free. It's free, and anyone can do it. That's what I would say.
That's a good one. That's a good one to remind everybody. It's free. Everybody can do it.
You can do it on your own time when you want to, and you can mentally practice. You could mentally practice having conversation. Repeat a conversation in your head and have a mental thing with a dialogue. Look in the mirror and see your expression. Were you smirking or not? We don't see ourselves.
Right. That's good.
So
That's good.
There's lots of exercises. There's lots of things to learn.
Yeah, always. That's really
it's easy. It's easy, but like anything good, everything takes practice, and anything that deals with the brain and the emotional system takes practice. It takes practice, and the more you practice, the bigger the neuroplasticity, the the bundles get, the healthier your neuroimmunoendocrine system is, and your blood pressure gets regulated, your autonomic nervous system gets regulated. So it's basically, it's all good.
Yeah, it's very good.
You can't go
Well, we
wrong.
thank you. We thank you, Jacqueline. This has been really enlightening to me, and I know to the audience. This is Edna White and my guest, Jacqueline Heller, saying goodbye for now.
Goodbye. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.